Today is Saturday, June 27th, 2020, which means I'm finally putting out another episode. Hello, Fiendlings, how the hell are ya? I figured June was going to be a bad time for creative endeavors, and boy was I right. I spent another week in Austin working, and finally got home where I collapsed in a heap. Took me a few days to get myself back together again, but now I'm cranking on more features and bug fixes before another field trial in a week or two. Assuming COVID doesn't throw yet another monkey wrench into this project, that is. But I've carved out this weekend to get things done, like posting late episodes, get some recording in on Trident, and of course, talk to you beautiful people. Speaking of beauty, if you want to see what my COVID beard looks like, go over to YouTube, search for DRS Podcast, and go watch one of our live shows from the past month or so. You can actually watch my beard grow episode to episode. If, that is, you have run out of things to read, watch, and are so bored you want to listen to middle-aged writers answer questions, tell anecdotes, and handle writing topics. Up to you. This beard ain't going to last much longer because I can't really fit a mask over this rhododendron bush. For those of you who are facing another round of isolation and work stoppages, you are not alone. Some of you, like my wife, work retail or at a bar, restaurant, or some other establishment/business that has been adversely affected by the current state of the world. All I can say is that I have to believe things are going to get better, and I'll do my best to entertain you for 15 to 25 minutes per week, while I try and get more content created for you to binge. That said, I have a lot to do today, so I better get this finished. Be safe, have a great week, and we'll talk again soon. Here's episode 7 of Legends of Garaaga. The pages were made of dried palm leaf and covered in symbols. The left page of the book was always covered in script similar to what Alexander's Indus translator used. The right side, however, was written in a completely different hand, more elegant, more pronounced. The impressions were thinner, yet whatever had been used for ink seemed to glow. As he turned the pages, the right side's symbols seemed to dance. Neratal rubbed at his eyes and flipped to the back page of the book. The page was filled with a single symbol, a crimson-colored spiral of marks that ended in a hook at the outer edge. It was the same symbol that had been tattooed on the backs of the villagers. Neratal closed the book and returned it to his pack. He let his eyes drift back to the river. An insect hovered just above the water and disappeared in a splash as a fish gobbled it from beneath. The watch would have to be taken seriously now. No more pondering at the riverbank at night. No more leaning against a tree for comfort. Instead, they would all trade off in shorter durations, which meant less sleep. Only 4 men left, and one of their number was ill. Too few to properly guard a camp. The girl had escaped the village. It was impossible to know if she traveled to another to tell them of the battle or its outcome. With any luck, the girl would die in the forest, and the scouts would remain shadows. "Sir?" Neratal continued to stare at the river. "What is it, soldier?" "Wounds are bound." "Packs ready?" "Yes, sir." "You will carry Elliston's share as well." There was a pause. Neratal turned around to face Aquila. The young man's head was bowed. "Yes, sir." "Good," Neratal growled. Aquila nodded and headed back to the tiny camp. Neratal turned back to the river. The woman. She had been close to the boulder. Had she traveled the same path from the village? He had examined each of the female bodies, hoping to see her face among their number. But the woman hadn't been among them. If she was a dream, some hallucination brought on by fatigue, why had she appeared near the boulder in the path? "Doesn't matter," Neratal whispered. He turned from the river and walked back into the camp. Elliston stood next to Aquila, attempting to retrieve his pack from the overloaded younger scout. "He carries," Neratal said. "You walk." "Sir," Elliston said and stepped away. "Darian, are you ready?" "Aye." "You're on point." The old soldier smiled. "Of course, sir." They left the clearing and headed down the riverbank. When they passed the path that led to the dead village, Narutal fought the urge to stare into its dark mouth. When Aquila awoke him for his watch, Narutal had snapped awake immediately. Before the battle, it took time for his mind to snap back to reality. But not that night. They might be hunted. Villagers might be streaming through the woods searching for the men that had destroyed his sister habitation. Aquila hadn't said a word, merely clenched his fist once. Nothing to report. Narutal nodded and watched the soldier lay in front of the fire. He stifled a yawn and let his eyes adjust to the darkness. The afternoon had dragged on. The scouts had marched beneath the hot sun in silence. Elliston and Aquila were both winded easily, and the party had to make frequent stops. At each cessation, Darien checked the wounds on the young soldier, ensuring the poultices of mud and herb were still holding together. The sweat from the burning sun kept running into Aquila's cuts, making him wince, but again he made no complaints. Narutal was proud of the boy. Tomorrow he would distribute their load more evenly, if only to ensure they could travel faster. Clouds had finally given them some relief from the heat, but the moisture in the air stuck to them like a plague. The mosquitoes and flies enjoyed the shade, visiting the men in swarms. Fresh welts from bites covered their arms and faces. At dusk, Narutal called a halt, and they made camp in the forest. The men had to walk some distance into the tree-choked land before finding a clearing large enough for a fire pit and their gear. Darien dug the fire pit without being asked, while Aquila and Elliston sat up against the trees. "You will sleep," Narutal said to Elliston. "You look better than yesterday, but not well enough for my liking." "Sir, I feel—" "Food, rest, sleep. That's an order." "Aye." "Darien, once you get the fire going, you're on first watch." "Sir!" the old man growled. "Short shifts. Once the moon rises, wake Aquila. At its apex," he said as he turned to the young soldier, "you will wake me." Aquila nodded. "Dry for evening meal?" "Yes, start unpacking." Narutal had walked the perimeter of the small clearing. The trees were thinner in that part of the forest. He saw remnants of an old fire that must have made room for the young bark. At least they would have a clearer sight line in the night, but less of the moon's light would penetrate the canopy so deep in. Aquila had set out some of the booty from the village, dried meat and fruit. The men had eaten in silence. When they finished, Narutal cleared some leaves from the ground and picked up a stick. "We are going to Lothal," he had said. "From Lothal, we'll secure passage to Ur." The scouts had looked at him expectantly. He smiled. "Then we're going to Babylon." For a moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. Darien rubbed at his beard. "If the king has sent orders to Babylon, we'll be in chains, or worse." Narutal pulled the book from his pack and held it up. "We have something to trade now." "What is that?" Elliston asked. "The villagers kept it in some sort of temple," Darien said. Elliston grinned. "You think Alexander will want it?" "Absolutely he will. At the very least, the magistrate will keep us safe until his return, and who knows how long that will be." "It's a gamble, sir," Aquila said. "Yes, it is, but it's either that or we wander this valley for the rest of our lives." With that, Narutal had placed the book back in his pack and laid out the watch list. The men said nothing more about the plan. As Darien took first watch, Elliston and Aquila were already asleep. Narutal followed soon after into a dreamless, restless drowse. He kept the fire to his back, glancing up into the leaf-choked sky. The moon was directly over them, although Narutal could barely make out a sliver of its shape. At least it wouldn't interfere with his night vision. Without the intense moonlight, it would be difficult for him to spot interlopers. The small fire crackling in the pit was more than enough to scare off most animals, but would serve as a beacon to any looking for them. "Should put it out," he thought. Elliston's infrequent phlegm-choked coughs were another indicator of their position. If anyone was looking for them, they'd find the party easily enough. If Alexander had changed his mind and decided exile was not a strong enough punishment, they would have already died 1,000 times over. Exile for service, Nerital thought. He sneered in the darkness. He and his scouts traveled for months, gathering intelligence in the dangerous mountains and valleys apart from the comfort of the tents and servants, eating what they could scavenge or hunt. As had been planned, Nerital's scouts attempted to meet up with the army more than a month after their departure, in order to convey news. The army was not to be found. Alexander's forces had split into 3, each taking a different path into the Indus. Nerital had not known that, not until he found a regiment in the eastern portion of the country. By the time he and his scouts located Alexander's main camp, the rest of his men had died, all but the 3 sleeping near the fire. He wondered how many other groups like his had been sent for folly, only to be awarded with exile or execution. Zeus Amun-Ra, he muttered. Nerital scanned the woods and walked in a slow circle, his back to the fire. He stopped. A chill rattled his bones. He took a deep breath and clenched the Xiphos tightly. Many lengths in the distance, the outline of a face stared at him. Its head was triangular, like that of the village altar. The eye sockets were deep set and blank. Nerital forced his eyes to blur, let them refocus, and stared again. The shape dissolved into a meaningless pattern of shadows. He let out the breath in his lungs. Just another trick of the trees. Since leaving the mountains and entering the forest along the river, the night watches could get spooky. Every once in a while, a tree's thick branches would become a grinning face or some djinn-like visage. But the singer in the river... Garaaga, the villagers had chanted. He'd heard the name before, and now that he thought about it, perhaps the Naiades had sung it. Maybe. Or maybe it was just his mind looking for connections that weren't there. A branch cracked in the forest to his left. He slowly turned toward the sound, Xiphos held before him. The small shape moved slowly across the forest floor. Another rodent of some kind. They had seen many strange animals since entering the Indus. Waterfowl that stood on long legs, rodents with long bodies, and, of course, more snakes than Nerital had imagined possible. He watched the shape move off deeper into the forest. The crackle of animals stepping on dead branches was another standard of night watch. That and the rattle of limbs or the whooshing wind high in the canopy. Nerital glanced at his sleeping men and smiled. Another crack caught his attention, and he turned. The face was back. Only this time it was closer, larger. He blurred his vision once more and then refocused. The outline was still there. Still facing it, he reached down and felt for a rock or stick, anything he could use. His fingers finally touched something solid, and he pulled it up with his left hand. The shadowy outline hadn't moved. He cocked back his arm and threw a heavy stick into the brush, aiming for the grinning visage. The stick bounced off a tree a foot away from the shape. Still, it didn't move. Nerital held his breath, waiting. A light wind rustled through the trees. He fought the urge to blink, staring into that face, that shape. Another branch cracked somewhere in the forest. Nerital ignored it. The shape's mouth seemed to open wider, the eyes narrowing. The fire popped. Nerital jumped in surprise. Adrenaline vibrating his body, he looked back where the shape had been. It was gone.